Hey, Nina, why don't you go ahead? It's 19 according to my computer. So we might as well just get going and I know people will join along the way.
Okay, sure. Just to kind of quickly, Jane just mentioned her YouTube channel, and there is a link to it in on our website, I believe, where we talked about her presentation. Um, okay, so today we are honored to have author Jane Kalmes with us to talk about mystery story structure. Jane is the author of the Kitty Callahan Mysteries. She writes about bootleggers, baddies, and romance on the mean streets of Jazz Age Chicago. Jane also teaches mystery writing. She loves to provide clear, actionable tips on writing plot twists, clues, suspects, and all the rest. Her mystery writing textbook, The Tangled Web, is the definitive resource for the genre. You can also find her mystery writing tips on her Substack, The Perfect Crime, and on her eponymous YouTube channel. Her videos are reassuring, entertaining, and full of the kind of practical wisdom that most of us mystery writers search for. And if you have any questions, folks, we're going to try to address them towards the end at the end of the presentation. So if you can, put them in the Q&A box. Thank you, and please welcome Jane.
Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be here, and thank you to the Mavens of Mayhem for inviting me today. I'm really excited to be talking with you about one of my favorite topics, which is story structure. Okay, so I am going to take just a moment to share my screen, and we are going to get started. And boom, there we go. All right. So today we're going to be talking about story structure and mysteries. Now, if you're familiar with story structures like the Blake Snyder beat sheet from Save the Cat or The Hero's Journey, this talk is going to draw on some concepts that are familiar to you, but we're going to be giving everything a twist that makes it more custom fitted to the mystery genre. And if you're not familiar with these story structures, that's okay too, because we're going to go through everything step by step and see how we can use the foundation of a solid story structure to make sure your novel is really hitting on all cylinders, delivering twists and surprises that really sucker punch the reader, while also leaving her with a satisfying emotional experience that can allow the book to linger in her heart. Okay, when I'm sitting down to plan a new mystery novel, here's one thing I know, and that's that I don't want to write just a case. I want to tell a story. I want to tell how somebody's life changed forever because of a case they had to solve, because of a person they had to help, because of a secret they had to uncover. And that means that I need to know right up front what change my sleuth has to undergo. Maybe she's a young witch who needs to embrace the power she's always seen as a curse. Maybe he's a down and out big city detective who needs to recover his confidence after his last case ended in a fatal mistake. Or maybe she's a spunky gal who just moved to a small town and needs to find her place within it. Well, whatever problem my sleuth is facing at the beginning of the story is what I call her chronic issue. It's a problem of long standing, which is quietly but decidedly diminishing her life. She doesn't really feel up to the challenge of facing it down, but that's okay because just a few pages in, she's going to get hit smack in the face with an acute issue, a problem happening right now that demands action. And in almost all mystery novels, this acute issue is going to be the same exact one. A murder occurs, and the protagonist feels compelled to solve it. This case, this acute issue, is going to give our sleuth the push she needs to finally face up to her chronic issue and conquer it. And the end of our book will see her standing in a place she couldn't have inhabited on page one. Our young witch will be a budding sorceress, having used her powers to unmask the killer. Our down and out detective will be back in the saddle, having pulled out every trick in the book to save a kidnapping victim. And our spunky gal will be surrounded by a found family of locals who she had to befriend in order to crack the case. So let's see how this looks in a best-selling mystery novel, Paula Hawkins' The Girl on the Train. Our protagonist in this book is Rachel, an alcoholic obsessed with her former life when she was married to Tom. Every day, she mourns her lost marriage as she takes the train past her old house where she lived with Tom. She also watches Tom's neighbors, Scott and Megan, whose marriage she has come to idolize. One day, Rachel wakes up from an alcoholic stupor, covered in blood, with no memory of the previous night. When she learns that Megan was killed that very evening, she is compelled to investigate. This forces her to uncover secrets about her own past, eventually learning that Tom spent the last years of their marriage systematically gaslighting her, castigating her for the way she behaved while drunk, even though the events he shamed her for never actually happened. Furthermore, Tom is Megan's killer. He had an affair with her and killed her when he learned she was pregnant. In a terrifying showdown, Rachel is forced to kill Tom. With her newfound knowledge, she feels ready to move past her broken marriage and forward into a new life. This method of structuring a story works so well that it can be expressed as a formula, or better yet, I like to use this little Mad Lib. Once there was a woman named Rachel who was unable to move forward in life due to her regrets. One day, a murder occurred, and she felt compelled to solve it. And again, in mystery novels, that acute issue is almost always going to be the very same one. This forced her to uncover secrets about her own past. Therefore, she changed and began looking forward instead of back. But to take your sleuth on her journey toward conquering her chronic issue and solving the case, we're going to have to take her through quite a few steps. And these steps are called story beats, moments that need to occur in the story for it to feel complete. Your sleuth is going to have to go through highs and lows, moments of self-doubt and recommitment before she can truly find her way to that summit of triumph we want to see her standing on in the final pages. And here are the steps she'll be taking. This is my Tangled Web story structure for my upcoming book, The Tangled Web. This structure has 16 story beats, and we're going to go through these one by one. First, we have the opening scene. The very first scene of your book has two important jobs. First, it needs to hook the reader, but also, just as importantly, it needs to make the reader a promise about the kind of book you're going to deliver. So, what do I mean here by making the reader a promise? Well, think back to when you learned to write an essay in junior high. If your English teacher was like mine, she taught you that the first paragraph of your essay should be your thesis paragraph. It should tell the reader briefly what the rest of the essay will tell them in greater detail. Well, you can think of the first scene of your book as a thesis scene. It's where you show the reader briefly what the rest of the story will show them in greater detail. So, if your book is funny, this scene should be funny. If it's gritty or poignant or deeply steeped in historical lore, these aspects should be on display in this very first scene. You might do this by introducing your sleuth, but there are times when the right way to make this promise is without your protagonist on site. This is why the first scene of Jurassic Park doesn't introduce us to paleontologist Alan Grant. Rather, it shows us a dinosaur attack. Because the promise this movie wants to make to the viewers is dinos, and that's what we want to put right up front. Similarly, you may want to show us the murder on page one, or showcase the strange, creepy town in which your protagonist hasn't yet arrived. That's fine. Whatever it is about your book that is uniquely appealing, whatever it is that is going to draw readers in and that you want to deliver on for them in a big way, that's what goes in this scene. Now, our second beat is called opening status, and this one is definitely going to have the protagonist in it because it also has a very important job, which is to show us the sleuth's chronic issue. We need to see what's wrong and how it's impacting her life. If he needs to recover his confidence after a case gone bad, here's where we see how little he really trusts himself. If she needs to embrace a magical talent, here is where we see how much this ability troubles her, how she wishes she never heard of magic because she really just wants to be like all the other girls. After opening status, we have inciting incident. Okay, here is where your sleuth will learn about the case for the very first time. This beat is most often going to be the murder, but it could also be a lesser crime that will eventually play into the murder plot. Maybe your sleuth receives a threatening letter in the mail. Maybe she'll learn that her sister's husband is having an affair. Whatever it is, whether she's seeing the murder or whether she's seeing a smaller disruption to the order of her society, whatever it is, launches her on the quest for more information. And that's when she winds up in getting curious. Okay, this is the first of our 4 investigation beats. And each of these beats, uh, there we go, our 4 investigation beats. And each of these beats is going to take place over several scenes. We have so many things we need to do during these beats. We need to question witnesses, search offices, puzzle over the case with a sidekick, and later during this webinar, we are going to talk about how to get all the sleuthing scenes into place. But first, let's talk about the fact that each of these 4 investigation beats has a slightly different flavor. During this first one, your sleuth asks a few questions, but at this point, she's not fully committed to solving the case. We've got to draw her in farther and make this a case she absolutely has to solve. This beat also has a couple of practical tasks we want to get out of the way. We want to give introductions to all the characters who will eventually become our suspects, and we want to start getting the reader familiar with any rules she needs to know to understand the world. So, in a paranormal mystery, for example, here's where you might explain the basic rules that govern how magic works in your world. All right, next up is the challenge accepted, and this beat occurs at the 25% mark in the manuscript. The sleuth commits to the case, and this commitment is going to be emotional. Now, it's possible that your sleuth has already made a professional commitment to the case, but that is not what we are talking about here. If a client walks into my private eye's office on page 1, sure, she's taking the case, but she still won't have her challenge accepted moment until she decides that the case matters to her, until the case changes for her from a curiosity to a gotta solve it, can't let it go mystery. And how do we know that it matters to her? Because for the first time, your sleuth is going to have to put skin in the game. She's going to have to contend with her chronic issue and get just a little bit closer to conquering it. Here's where our young witch character works a spell for the first time to learn the identity of the person who left behind a critical clue. Here's where our down and out detective begins to trust himself again by following up on a hunch. Investigation beat number 2 is called On the Case. Okay, this is another multi-scene beat where the sleuth begins investigating in earnest. And this beat is pure fun. I like to use this beat to showcase all the wonderful settings and scenes that belong in the world of my novel. If you've promised your reader an Egyptian mystery, here is where you show us some pyramids. If you've promised a spy drama, here is where your sleuth goes undercover. After the second investigation beat, we're going to arrive at the midpoint, and this beat occurs right smack in the middle of your manuscript. Although the common term for this beat is midpoint, I sometimes like to think of it as a place of change because it should involve some major changes for your sleuth. She may gain a new ally, or for that matter, she may lose one. She may travel deeper into the special world of the story. But the 2 most common things to happen at this point are another dead body or a plot twist. All right, now here's the definition I like to use for a plot twist. A plot twist is something the reader believes that turns out to be false. And the reason I like this definition so much is that I found it the most useful for actually helping me understand how to construct plot twists. Because if a plot twist is something the reader believes that turns out to be false, then we can see that my first job as a writer is just to convince the reader of something that isn't true. Maybe I'll use the placement of the victim's drowned body in her health club swimming pool to convince the reader that she must have died there. But then, at the midpoint, we'll get a look at a lab report that says that the water in her lungs wasn't chlorinated, but in fact had traces of bath salts in it. Now we know that we're probably looking for a private residence that might have been the scene of the crime, and that can change everything we thought we understood about the case. Or maybe I'll lead the reader to assume a false belief about the victim's identity. The reader will have every reason to believe that my victim, found with her passport on her body, is exactly who she says she was. But when the owner of that passport shows up at the midpoint, we'll realize that our victim was actually someone who had assumed her identity. Now we'll have to turn our attention to the question of whether this murder was a case of mistaken identity or whether the villain knew exactly what he was doing. When I use a plot twist for the midpoint, I love to have it spin the case off in a new direction that makes my sleuth question everything that's come before. All right, but once we get past the midpoint, we're in our third investigation beat, and I call this one Things Fall Apart. Now, here is where things get dicey for your sleuth, where theories explode and where shots get fired. Your goal here is to hit the sleuth with a number of small defeats, softening her up for a double whammy that's going to come in the next beat. These defeats may come while investigating, but they can also take place in her subplots. Here is where she might have a big blow up with her love interest, or find that her newly developed magic skills aren't up to snuff. The defeats your sleuth suffer, oh, sorry. So the defeats that your sleuth suffers may come from the inherent difficulty of solving the case, but they also may be deliberately engineered by the villain. By now, he's probably figured out that the sleuth is onto him. This is a great time for him to destroy evidence, engineer frame-ups, commit cover-up crimes, or attack the sleuth directly. And when we're done with all that, we still aren't done beating up on our sleuth because we're going to get into a grave setback. Here's where the sleuth will suffer her worst defeat of the entire novel. Now, this beat is also a great place to drop a body, but there are plenty of other things that can happen here. This is a great place for kidnappings, betrayals, and unjust arrests. It's also a time when we might see these sleuths' deep, dark secrets exposed, which is something I can easily see happening to our young witch who doesn't want to be publicly known as associated with magic. And another thing that can happen here is that the sleuth finds himself kicked off the case, which seems like the perfect defeat to hand our struggling detective. After that, we have a beat called Down and Out. Here's where your sleuth has to grapple emotionally with the defeat she experienced in a grave setback. Devastated, she doubts her ability to solve the case. And the simple reason we need this beat is that we need to feel the gravity of what just happened to her in a grave setback. If she just picked herself up and got back to work, we'd assume that whatever happened didn't really mean that much to her. If you want us to believe that she really got a gut punch, we need to see her doubled over. And it's going to set the stage for her to recommit in the next beat, which is Go the Hard Road. This beat occurs at the 75% mark in the manuscript. The sleuth rallies and realizes that her commitment to this case has not been total. Sure, she thought she was all in, but she has been holding something back, something related to her chronic issue. Maybe she's been afraid to ask for help because her chronic issue is a need to trust others. Or maybe she's been unwilling to investigate a particular location because it's related to a trauma in her past. In order to keep pursuing the case, she breaks through this barrier and gets still closer to conquering her chronic issue. Here's where our young witch commits everything to a magic ceremony that will increase her powers and give her what she finally needs to solve this thing. Here's where our detective decides to take the law into his own hands, committing everything in an effort to unmask the bad guys. Our final investigation beat is called Final Clues. All right, here we are. Now that your sleuth has committed everything, she's able to assemble the final clues and find the solution to the case. Then comes the confrontation. This is a huge beat, and it's what your reader has been waiting for all along. We'll reveal the identity of the villain, and just as importantly, your sleuth will triumph over her chronic issue. Your young witch will embrace her magic as a full part of her identity. Your struggling detective will find that he has the confidence to go toe-to-toe with the villain in a huge scene that ends in triumph. We'll also hear the villain's confession so we can understand the why behind the crime, and we'll see him brought to justice, usually because he's been exposed and is on his way to conviction, but sometimes because he winds up dead by the end of the scene, especially in thrillers. Our next beat is called Loose Ends. There are generally quite a few loose ends to wrap up in a mystery. Here's where the sleuth explains any lingering clues, where the sidekick asks, "But how did you know the doctor was the Duke's son?" And the sleuth says, "Well, their distinctive gray eyes were a dead giveaway." This is also our opportunity to wrap up any storylines related to our suspects. Perhaps we had a suspect whose potential motive for murder was to acquire enough cash to leave her abusive husband. She turns out to be innocent, but the reader still needs to know what happened with her story. And here, in Loose Ends, is where we can include a nice scene showing that she's finally found the courage to leave him after all. Next, we have Celebrate Sleuth's Changed Status. We see how the sleuth's life has changed now that her chronic issue has been resolved. This beat sees the sleuth standing in a place that would have been impossible for her when we met her in the novel's beginning. Your young witch is comfortable with her powers and finding that they open her up to a deeper comfort in her own skin than she's ever had. Your down and out detective is confidently managing his team, doing good work in his community, and his fears are no longer the master of him. And the last beat I call the story continues. Now, this is an optional beat. It's not going to be in every mystery, especially not in standalones, but here is where you get a chance to hint at developments that are forthcoming in the series. It might be where you show your sleuth hanging up her shingle for her new detective business, or perhaps where you indicate that one of the dangers she's faced in this novel isn't truly over. Now, here's the rub. When I go to plan a story out, I don't start with beat number 1 and continue until I hit beat number 16. At this stage in the project, I think of myself as sort of an architect. When an architect sits down to plan a new house, he doesn't start drawing from right to left. He starts by roughing in the most important rooms first. The entry hall, the kitchen, the living room, the large rooms that give the house its structure and its unique character. And that's just what I suggest you do with your story. You'll start by creating the important high points and low points of the story, the beats that give your story its structure and its unique character. After that, the architect starts filling in some of the other rooms, the bedrooms, the baths, areas that still add a great deal to the overall experience of the house, but aren't quite as foundational to the plan. You'll do the same, adding in the beats that comprise your sleuth's investigation, as well as that major defeat that she suffers along the way. Finally, the architect is going to fill in the details. He'll give the house closets, light switches, an HVAC system. The potential home buyer isn't going to waste a lot of time thinking about these necessities, but she sure will miss them if they're not there. And here is where you'll firm up the beginning and the end of your novel. Definitely important parts of the reader experience, but once you have the meat of the story in place, it's easy to see how these should look. Working through the beats in this order is the best way I've found to build up my story structure in a way that's organic, that builds gradually upon my early decisions and doesn't get me too lost in the weeds. So we're going to actually see exactly how this works, and to get started, we're going to need a sleuth. A sleuth with a chronic issue. So let's say my sleuth is a freshman at an Ivy League school, and here's her chronic issue. She doesn't feel like she belongs here. She was admitted because some strings were pulled by her family members, but she feels like everyone around her is smarter, more capable, and just more special than she is. She needs to learn that she does have something special to offer the world, and spoiler alert, it's going to be her mad sleuthing skills. This is going to give me enough of a spine to get started inventing beats. The very first two beats I'm going to tackle are the inciting incident and the midpoint. Okay, why start here? Well, because one of these should probably be the murder, and that is the very most important structural pin I need to get into place in order to see my plot take shape. Okay, a word here about midpoint murders. The conventional wisdom in publishing at this time is that an early murder, a murder as the inciting incident, is the way to go. This is what agents and readers have come to expect, and it's a way to get your plot rolling right out of the gate. However, I have to say that from a structural point of view, a midpoint murder works very nicely. Many of Agatha Christie's mysteries follow this structure, and when you have a midpoint murder, usually the first half of the novel will be about fleshing out the tensions and secrets that exist among the community of characters. Then, at the midpoint, all that tension explodes into murder. So, even if you want to start a series with a nice, juicy chapter 1 murder to get readers hooked, the midpoint murder is a nice tool to have in your back pocket for later on down the line. But I don't think that's the direction I'm going to go with this plot. I'd like to have my sleuth roommate be murdered early on in the novel as the inciting incident. And for the midpoint, I think I'll reveal that the roommate was killed by mistake. The actual intended victim was the sleuth herself. So great, I know what happens. My next step is going to be writing what I call a scene brief for each of these beats. Just one or two sentences that gives the bare bones story of what happens in this scene. For the roommate's murder, I'm going to write that my sleuth came home late after a long night of studying and found her roommate dead in their dorm room, poisoned. And for my midpoint twist, I'm going to write that my sleuth realized that her stash of chocolate, which she's been using to fuel her late night study sessions, is unexpectedly empty. Now she remembers her roommate asked her for some the evening of her death. It's a detail that skipped the sleuth's memory until now, but now she's sure that her roommate took the chocolate was poisoned, and the roommate died in her place. After the inciting incident and the midpoint are in place, it's time to think about my sleuth's personal journey toward conquering her chronic issue. There are three main points where she makes progress towards this, and these are the challenge accepted, where she first takes a step toward conquering the issue in order to solve the case. Go the hard road, where she breaks through a barrier she never thought she'd cross, and the confrontation, when she finally busts through her issue and rises above it. And I'm going to write scene briefs for these as well. I'll say that during the challenge accepted, she is the only one to take stock of a critical clue. Let's say that the initial theory floated by the police is that the roommate committed suicide because of a nearly empty pill bottle next to her bed. But my sleuth will realize that this doesn't quite fit the circumstances. The roommate had an inability to swallow pills and always crushed them instead. But her pill crusher is in the bathroom, where it always is, and clearly hasn't been used. Our sleuth will decide that the roommate was deliberately poisoned. She won't find out the vehicle for the poison until our midpoint plot twist, when she finds the missing chocolate, but just having noted this critical clue will give her a shot of confidence and get her asking more questions. All right, what about go the hard road? Well, this one is actually fairly easy to nail down. All you have to do is come up with a list of things you're sure your sleuth absolutely does not want to do, and then force her to do one of them in order to continue pursuing the case. One thing I'm sure my sleuth would be dead set against is asking for help because she secretly feels so inferior to everyone around her and feels like she has to keep up a front of self-sufficiency. But if she wants to continue the case, she's going to have to ask for help. Let's say that she just can't get her head around the puzzle, and so she seeks another perspective from another freshman down the hall. This will be a character with whom she's chatted a few times during the plot, and now that they're sharing ideas, she not only feels like she's getting a handle on the case, she also feels like she's made a connection. And that gives her hope that she is someone who can make her way in the Ivy League community after all. Lastly, the confrontation. How am I going to really force my sleuth to go up against her feelings of self-doubt and conquer them? Let's say that she learns that the villain is actually that helpful girl down the hall. She and the sleuth were up for the same scholarship, so the villain tried to kill her in order to increase her own chances. You see, the villain doesn't think our sleuth is special enough to deserve it. She knows that the sleuth got into the Ivy League due to her connections rather than academics, and she doesn't think she should have to compete with someone like that. She'd much rather eliminate her. Having to go toe-to-toe with someone who thinks she doesn't deserve to be here, or even to live, forces our sleuth to finally realize how much value she brings to the table. There's her sleuthing skills, sure, but also the profound drive for justice that made her take on the case in the first place when the police were ready to dismiss it. She's got a lot to offer, and in a stunning confrontation, she not only comes to realize her personal worth, she also triumphs over the villain and takes her down. Once I have the challenge accepted, go the hard road, and confrontation in place, I'm starting to see the spine of my sleuth's emotional journey. But I still have one big question to answer. What's that major defeat that launched her onto the hard road in the first place? Well, it's got to be something that forced her to ask for help, so what if our sleuth was framed for committing the roommate's murder? The villain has planted evidence against her, figuring that getting her arrested will be just as an effective a way of nosing her out of the scholarship as killing her. This means that her freedom is on the line, and it may also mean that her status as a university student is in question. This makes her just desperate enough to seek help. You can see that I'm accumulating a nice, tidy list of scene briefs. And what I'm working toward is creating my scene index, a top to bottom list of all the scenes that belong in my novel. This is the one tool I really want to have when I begin writing the book. And I think of it as a communication tool between current me, the person planning the book, and future me, the me who just wants to put her head down and write without worrying that she's going to find herself 6 feet deep in a plot hole. Everything I'm doing is for the convenience of that future me, and I don't want to let her down. But now we're at a sticky part because we've got these four big beats to deal with, the investigation beats. These may be only 4 beats, but they're long. They're made up of many scenes, and that means that a lot of the time that your reader spends with your sleuth is going to be spent right here. So we want to make these beats fun. We want to dress them up with cool suspects and clever deductions. And there are several kinds of scenes that really belong in these beats that we expect to see in a mystery novel, such as suspect interviews, the discovery of clues, introspection scenes where your sleuth goes over the facts of the case, either in her own head or with the help of a sidekick, and snooping scenes where your sleuth may sneak into places, lie to get information, go through suspects' possessions, and generally do whatever she has to do to get the facts. And that's a lot. So, how do you take all of that material and get it all boiled down to a nice, tidy scene index? Well, one step at a time. That's how. What I like to do is take a big piece of poster board and divide it into 4 sections, one for each of my investigation beats. Then I'll take some element that I know is part of my investigation and ask, where does it most properly belong? Let's say I've got a clue that tells my sleuth how the chocolates were poisoned. She finds one remaining chocolate that has rolled under her roommate's bed and been overlooked. She turns it over and finds a small hole, as though it has been punctured with a hypodermic needle. She theorizes that this is how the poison was introduced. So, based on the plot we've constructed this far, can we figure out which investigation beat this clue should fit into? Well, it obviously happens after the sleuth has realized that the chocolates were the vehicle for the poison, which happened at our midpoint. Therefore, it needs to go into either things fall apart or final clues. And either seems reasonable, but I think I want to keep my sleuth pretty active in final clues, trying to avoid her framed up murder charge, and it just doesn't feel like the right beat for the kind of low danger, low stakes scene that would give our sleuth the opportunity to lounge around her dorm room and spot something under her roommate's bed. I'm going to drop this into Things Fall Apart. I'm also going to need a clue that links up to this one, that shows which character might have had access to hypodermic needles. Let's say that my villain had access. In fact, she has plenty of needles in her room because she has diabetes. I think I can drop a clue about the villain being diabetic into our very first investigation beat, Getting Curious, but I don't want to be quite so clear as to mention diabetes by name. That feels like the sort of detail a savvy mystery reader would store away. Instead, I'll create a scene brief for a scene in which the sleuth offers several study buddies some sweet snacks, hoping to make friends, and the villain is the only one to refuse them. Another thing we're definitely going to do during our investigation is consider false suspects, or as I like to call them, suspect subplots. Most suspects can be thought of as subplots. The subplot begins when the sleuth first has a reason to suspect them. It continues as she accumulates clues about them. And then the subplot ends when we have a reason to dismiss them from suspicion. So let's invent a suspect and see if we can plot the beginning and ending of his subplot on our table here. Let's say one of my suspects is my victim's ex-boyfriend. She recently dumped him, and he's been pinning nasty notes to their dorm room door ever since. Notes like, "You belong to me," and "You'll be sorry." Where should this subplot begin? Well, this is such an obvious suspect that it feels natural for his subplot to begin during the first quarter of the book, before our sleuth has even made a commitment to the case. I'll create the following scene brief. The sleuth attends a candlelight vigil for the victim and is angered to see the ex-boyfriend there, crying after the shoddy way he treated her friend. She tries to confront him, but he gives her the slip. And I'll stick it into getting curious. Now, what about this subplot's ending? Well, first, let's talk about the several ways that a suspect's subplot can end. The most common is that we learn a secret the suspect had that was not the murder. We might learn, for example, that he was conducting a crime at the time of the murder, so cannot be guilty, but also has been unable to be forthright about his alibi. But there are several other possible endings to a suspect's subplot. It's not always a secret. We might have a reason to dismiss the suspect due to evidence. We might have an emotional appeal scene in which the sleuth talks to the suspect and walks away convinced that he absolutely cannot be the killer. Or we might end the suspect subplot by ending the suspect. Having him turn up as an additional murder victim is a great way for his subplot to be over. And in the case of this plot, the suspect subplot should be automatically ended when we learn that the sleuth and not her roommate was the intended victim. Only, I don't like the sound of that. I don't want a subplot to just get cut off short like that. I want a clear ending that lets the reader feel like my sleuth is making progress. To me, this feels like a subplot that should end with an emotional appeal, a scene in which our sleuth becomes convinced that our suspect just can't be the guy. Our sleuth will pin down the boyfriend and demand to know why he harassed her friend. That's when she'll learn that he sincerely loved the victim and that he never sent those messages. The victim blamed them on him, perhaps because she didn't want the sleuth to know who had really sent them. This is a scene that deepens the case, pointing at a dark secret in the roommate's past. But since it has to happen before the sleuth learns that she's the intended victim, there's an obvious place to put it. It goes straight into on the case. I hope you're starting to see how getting those early pins into place, knowing what happens at each of the big moments in the story, is going to help give order to these smaller moments, slowly building up the structure of our novel until we have a nice, neat, tidy list of scenes to work from. Once I've got my investigation nicely filled out, all I'm left with is the beats at my book's beginning and at the end. And now that I've done all this work, it's fairly obvious what those beats need to look like. The book's opening will see my sleuth arriving on campus racked with anxiety and self-doubt. And the ending will see her having come into her own, striding across campus like she owns the place, and making plans for the future she's always dreamed of. And now I'd just like to mention that where you can find me on the web, which is my YouTube channel, Jane Kalmes. That's where I have tons of info about how to come up with clues and how to hide them in plain sight, how to come up with unique plot twists and reveal them in a way that's surprising and satisfying. And I should also mention that I will have in the next couple of months a book out on this topic called The Tangled Web. The link right here is to my newsletter sign up. And if you sign up, you'll get all the info about that book's release. I'm really excited for it. And I would also like to thank again the Mavens of Mayhem for having me here today. And I'd love to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. There was, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. It gave me some great ideas. Someone did ask in the chat about you mentioned your book coming out, A Tangled Web, and someone asked about pre-order options. Is that the best way to find out, just getting through your newsletter or?
The newsletter is the best option. Pre-orders are not up just yet, but I am proceeding towards publication as fast as my little fingers can format. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a good resource. All of the information in today's talk is going to be there and so much more.
That's awesome. Somebody did comment also in the chat that writing a scene brief would get somebody most of the way to a complete one-page synopsis.
Oh, that's
So
an excellent point. That's a
um,
really good point.
Okay. Libby asked, are these templates available? They're spectacular. And I guess, again, it would be in your upcoming book.
Yeah, the book is going to be the best place to get it. I'm sorry that that's not out yet, but I am looking forward to it.
Okay, great. Someone else, Betsy asks, would you change your architecture for a short story?
I would play with it a little bit. The first thing I would do with a short story is I most likely would get rid of the midpoint. The reason that we need a midpoint is, if you've ever heard the middle of a book described as sort of saggy, that's because there's a limited amount of time that the reader can stay interested in a linear progression of the case. They need to see that case kind of shoot off in a remarkable new angle. And so that's kind of what the midpoint is for, not so much necessary with a short story. And yeah, I would kind of keep the beginning and the end of the structure and cut out a lot of the stuff in the middle to make a short story. Another thing I would consider doing in a short story is often we'll create a scene to show a clue dropping. We'll create a whole scene for the sleuth finding the hole in the bottom of the chocolate. But in a short story, you can kind of summarize this stuff and have it happen in a paragraph. And that gets um, and also getting rid of false suspects is another thing that you can do for short stories to make them play a little faster.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, Vanessa asks, for the chronic or acute issue that needs to be overcome, is the size of this change based on whether this is a series or a one-off? I'm concerned it will be hard to find a large personal issue for each book.
Okay, yeah, so that's a great question. So I really strongly feel that the first book in your series should come out with a big, powerful, chronic issue that changes the sleuth's life, that turns her into a sleuth or that recovers her confidence or something like that. But later on in the series, I feel like you want to do kind of quieter, um, quieter issues. I have a whole video about this on my YouTube channel where I actually talk about how I think one of the best ways to find quiet chronic issues is to watch shows. Okay, so the shows of the 80s and 90s where they were not serial shows. They were not shows where we were expecting to see the character stories progress in every episode. Rather, we were expecting to see they were episodic. We were expecting to come back and see kind of the same characters in the same situation every week. And those will often have little quiet chronic issues where a character is tempted away from one of their true values, but ultimately they affirm their value. Or where a character changes a non-series character, where they kind of evangelize their values to this non-series character and change that person's life for the better. And these are the sort of quieter, chronic issues that you can use to add a powerful character arc to later books in your series without having to kind of change the character in a dramatic way in every book, which can kind of make your reader feel like they don't really know this person and they aren't really very stable. Um, so that is the video I would recommend. I think I called it What's a Quiet Character Arc? And it has a I think picture of Riker from Star Trek uh as the thumbnail because I used a bunch of episodes from Star Trek to show how these quiet character arcs work.
Okay, great. Here, let's see. Here's another. Oh, I guess this is the same question in the Q&A that was in the chat about the chronic acute issue. And okay, that was, if any, does anyone else have any further questions for Jane? It was a great presentation.
Thanks. I really hope it was helpful. I'm always glad when I can help writers kind of break things down into steps that are actionable. I love actionable.
That's great. Once you get finished, everything in your Tangled Web is out. Will you be writing more mysteries? Are you going in, you have
Yeah.
any planned?
Yeah, so I have my Kitty Callahan mysteries, which take place in 1928 Chicago. So I've got big plans for that. I also, after The Tangled Web is published, I'm going to be writing a second nonfiction book, which is called the Plot Twist Encyclopedia. So there are all these plot twists that I have seen and that you have seen in the mystery genre. Plot twists like the mastermind or the inside job or the locked room murder. And the Plot Twist Encyclopedia is going to catalog about 30 different twists that are kind of staples of the genre, show how they work, give examples of real life plots that use them, and kind of help you construct them.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds like it'll be a great resource.
Thanks.
Is there anything else from anyone? And we're getting a lot of thanks here. A lot of people are saying your presentation was wonderful and thanking you.
Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, and Ellen here, Ellen says she really understands the beats in a way she hadn't from other models, and the format for mysteries helped make the beat approach real to her. So
Awesome. That's so
it's
wonderful. Thank you.
it's great. Um, well, I'm. You think we're ready to wrap up now? Maybe. Thank you so much, Jane. It was awesome. Thank you,
You are
and
so welcome.
it's great. Oh, and if people want to find your Kitty Callahan mysteries, are they available on
Yeah,
Amazon?
you can search for them on Amazon. Just uh, probably the best way to look for them is just my name, Jane Kalmes,
Okay.
and the first one is called The Black Rose Murders.
Okay. We'll definitely have to check those out. That sounds like a fascinating time period for a mystery.
I love it. I love it. I have so much fun getting to write in that period.
That's great. Um, Oh, so thank you very much, Jane, again. Thank you so much. And friends, before you leave, just want to remind you that next month our program will be, I have it down here, I made a note of it, will be April 19th, and it will be from history to mystery. And we'll feature four of our authors on writing historical mysteries. So that will be a great program to check out as well.
Well, thank you, Nina, and thank you, Mally and Ellen, for setting everything up. This has been a lovely morning.
It's been wonderful. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice job, Nina.
Thank you, Jennifer. Your background help, and that was a big help. I guess we're all set now. Okay. See
Great
you.
job. Thanks.
Thanks, Nina, Ellen, Mally. It was great. Thank you so much, Jenna, and again for your tech support throughout.
Yeah, so I
Thank
do
you.
think that it just run the April, send everybody the April link for the meeting and tell them to save that one in their calendar because the old link, since the update went through, that it has to, the link has to include the passcode, which is why it worked today when you resent it to people, but it didn't work when they were clicking on the old link. The good old Zoom update messed us up. That's all.
Yeah. So we were right. It was an update issue.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I'm wondering if it's possible as well, and I don't know, we've been going back and forth. Ellen, Cyril wasn't able to join because it was off the website again. So I'm not sure if it's the way we're setting it up on the web or the Zoom, but we can't, the moment 11:15 starts, nobody can get back to the program or nobody can get to the program link.
From the website. From the website.
On the website. So, because I noticed Cyril wasn't there, and since she was having a hard time before, Ellen had talked to Jody about it, and Jody said it was something with Zoom. Amy thought it was something with web when we were trying to look at it, but we haven't been able to troubleshoot that portion. So if you have any thoughts, because I know we've lost a few members because of that not being able to join in.
Well, according to Zoom, at least April's, I can't look at today's because we're still in it. But according to Zoom, the April one is set up, I'm sure, just like I set up this month's, and it allows participants to join at any time. They have to
Yeah,
use they have to use the link.
yeah.
Is it joining or is it registering? Huh,
No, they have to
that's a
they have
difference.
to register ahead of
Right.
time, and then they get the link, and then
But I
they
think what
participate.
we're talking about is that the link to register disappears
Yeah.
before
So,
meeting.
uh,
And
for
that might be a
instance,
Zoom thing because I went in yesterday to just and found a neat way to find out all the registers, people registering. I used to do it manually, but
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought
you
I
can
saw
click on
something
that.
like registration ends at a certain time, but I'm not the expert that Jenna is, but
Yeah,
I
you
think I
can't
saw
make it
something.
extend the registration past the starting point.
okay.
There,
Yeah.
that's not an option within Zoom. They have to register by the starting point. I don't have any way that I can make that adjustment.
So
So,
if I had registered, because I think I usually do, and I honestly think I forgot to register this time. Um, because I just cheat right now and go into the Maven's link. But if I had registered, I could have forwarded that to Cyril and she could have used that
yes,
registration,
but I
correct?
don't think you could have sent it to Cyril and Amy.
Use it at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty sure. I
So
mean, you
I,
could try it, but yeah, you could certainly register and save the link, and otherwise we could just remind people maybe on the
yeah.
website it should say that they have to register by the start. Like maybe
So
in the program information, it should say that on the website. So somebody doesn't think, oh, I'll just register the minute I want to get in. And if they come a little,
yeah.
Yeah.
then it can't let them in.
So I
Yeah,
think what I'll do is that I'll still come in and I can do and maybe recommend Amy do this next year. I'll sign up and I we can have that as an emergency backup. And I think we had ended up doing that with Lori in December. Or she got in with Mally's. I don't know, however, but we managed to get her in. And she had registered, but she was having trouble. But we could
Well,
have,
what you can, what you could have done, sorry, I didn't see that email. I was kind of dodging between email and
no,
chat.
you were doing so others.
But
That's fine.
the other thing you can do is if you get that email, you can copy the link. You're in the meeting, so you can copy the link and send it to her, and she should be able to get to it from there.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
as opposed
All
to having
right.
like
So that's,
you can
yeah,
also
because she
register
had
so you can
said,
have it there, but you should have been able to just, go under the participants, copy the invite link and send it to her. It's just they can't do the regular registration if they miss the time start.
oh, look
so
at
which
this. If
link
I
are
go
we
in,
what link are
if,
we copying though, Jenna?
Like, if you're already in the meeting, if you're already in the
if you're already in the meeting,
event, and that way, if it's already started at 11:15, I mean, we can always say the start time's 11:20 to Zoom to give the extra 5 minutes or something, but and we could still tell the speaker they can join at 11 or whatever time you want. But
Duncan,
it's going to show up on the calendar at
I'm
whatever
still
time.
on, Joe.
So
I found it under and under the meeting, sorry guys, under the meeting info. Um, I clicked on the meeting info link at the bottom of the screen
of
and it
more.
has the invite link. Will that work?
Yeah, so
That's
yeah,
it,
you can
right?
get it there, or you can
So
get it
where
by clicking the up arrow of the participants. There's an invite or copy the link. I would
Yes, copy
copy the link.
invite link. I see it.
And so either of those two
Perfect.
oh, okay, that's what I was wondering where it was. Thanks, Jenna.
you can send that
But
out.
that'll help. That's an even better solution because if somebody's in it, we can just send it and they don't have to worry about the
Registration.
awesome.
That's
Where is the link for that? Where is the link
So
for
you
the?
can get to it from, see where it says participants 5 and there's a little
Yes,
up arrow.
yeah.
You can click on the up arrow and then copy the link. You can send the invitation, but I think the invitation is going to make them go through the registration thing. So I'm not sure that would work after the meeting started. So I think if you just copy the invite link and just send it to them, that'll work. You can get to that exact same screen if you hit the More tab and go down to the meeting information button and then find it there. But it's easier just to get it right from the participants section. It's right in front of you. You don't have to.
I just tried it and it's sending me to the registration page.
You sent it to yourself. So go ahead and
Well, I put it in the I put it in
But
the
will it
web
let you
browser.
register?
Well, I've already registered, but let me see.
Mm.
It just sent me to the registration page. Let me see. Oh,
I mean, the upshot is we have to remember to register ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think if you just put that on our webpage, just to encourage people to
yeah.
remember for a straightforward thing, register in advance. And admittedly, I think we topped out at what, 29? Maybe there was a flash of a
I
No,
month.
think
28.
so.
28, yeah.
28.
Which is a
Well,
pretty good thing because we had 50, we usually get about half the people who register, more
yeah,
give or take.
yeah, because
And the,
everybody's just
it's,
automatically signing up thinking
Yeah,
this
they
is
read
really
it and
good
think,
and
oh,
I'll
that
watch.
looks good, and then they forget on the Saturday.
Yeah,
well, it's
It's
free.
it's
So
sunny.
what they don't have anything invested in it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
but if they're not members, they can't then view it later either, right? I
no,
mean,
they can.
Ravens could always
They
watch it later.
can.
Well, Amy, after a certain amount of time, will put it up on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But I don't
And
know.
so far the
I
YouTube channel is available to everybody.
Oh,
to
I
So
everybody. We
okay.
had originally said 6 months, but there've been a number of and that was for members and everybody, but we've been putting it up a little earlier, I think,
Yeah. Well, someone asked
right?
about it in this meeting when they could watch it because they wanted to view it again.
Yeah, I saw that. Your answer was perfect
Might have been a
because I
while.
think Amy will do that. Amy will just get it up in a couple of days. Um,
she said that mavens can access it, but I didn't want to interfere.
Yeah, I didn't.
I
I
think
didn't.
no,
we have to
that's
decide is why are we doing this programs and we're spending all this effort and what are we getting from it?
And should it? Well, so is it do you want it to be an advantage to the members, or do you just want to make it
right.
open to the whole community? I suppose if we, I mean, I think maybe, I don't know why the numbers are up. It might be because it's just the act that people, when they check on their national, they see that there are other groups. Maybe they're just signing up, not because they're necessarily in our geographic area. This will be the interesting thing to, or where did all the new, and maybe even Mally could figure out, run a report to see who's new and send an email to them about welcome, we're so happy to have you. Just out of curiosity, where are you and why
Why?
did you join?
Yeah.
So that if it turns
Yeah.
out that people are joining because they really like our programs, then we want to make sure we incentivize that.
Yeah.
But
And I think on one side too, there were a couple of people who did not renew, uh, looking at it. And for some reason, Jan went under our radar. But I think they were ones that joined because of Murderous March.
yeah, I'm sure every year we get a
And
bunch that join because
yeah, so I think that
they don't.
switching it to every 2 years will also make a difference. But we did go up, and again, we're promoting Jacqueline's. I see she's there, but she may have stepped away from her computer. Um, Jacqueline's promoting on Sync and in other
Mhm.
places. So
Well, there are some groups.
that,
The one
Yeah.
who's it? The one in Arizona does some great programming, and I keep thinking I
yeah,
should probably join them because I end up going to a lot of their webinars. But at the same time, they're free and open, and you can go watch the video late. They let anybody watch the videos later. You don't have to be a member now.
I've never been able to watch their video
Depends on which
later.
one it
You have to
is.
be a member.
Depends on which one
So
it
mm,
is. Grand Canyon one, I
yeah.
think you can watch.
I've had a few students that come and they come to my program and they're not signing up, but they're here.
Mm,
They come to my free programs in the
yeah.
community. They don't sign up,
yeah.
but
Well, it's
you're going
something
to
I
get
think
that. But
the
I mean, it's
executive
just a
board should talk about and decide what is our purpose? What's our mission? How do we
Yeah.
want to see in the community? And is do we need the extra funds from membership to ensure that we can do the local stuff for them? I mean, maybe the benefit for the member being a member is that maybe we do these events at libraries or bookstores, or there's a little bit more local programming. And if we need that to be funded so that we can, ensure that we get all the slots filled by speakers or whatever, then maybe we talk about what benefits, what should be required in order to do that. But for now, to have
A-
everything on the YouTube channels, fine, unless we decide we want to make sure our membership is contributing to.
And I think I'm trying to recall, Ellen and Jenna, you may have been there. Nina, I'm not sure. I don't remember. I think, did you join us last year, Nina, or the year before?
Last year, I believe.
Last year. There had been a discussion with having are videos only available on YouTube to members for at least 6 months, if not forever, because of trying to get people to come to the meetings. So it may have been it was released to members after 6 months and nobody else ever got it. Um, but Amy and Carol would definitely remember. And I know for Murderous March, they were not available. Even if you signed up to go, the window for
Very small.
registrants to review was very small. Uh,
Yeah.
in fact, I want to go back and
I
I'm
think that's
cheating
more
because I have access to everything.
I
But
think that's more common for conferences. I've going not just for writing conferences, but I'm a dog trainer. So dog training conferences and stuff, a lot of them have that, like, you register and you can watch them for, sometimes it's only 48 hours after, or
Yep.
sometimes it's a month, you get
yeah,
a month, you can watch the videos,
Yep.
and then they just go away. So you paid to attend the conference, and if you can't actually be there, there's a dog training conference that lasts 3 days. It's like 8 hours each day. It's fabulous. I'd love to go in person, but it's in the UK. And I've signed up, but who can sit on Zoom for 8 hours, 3 days in a row? But you
yeah,
only
it's
get like
awful.
a
I've done
few
it.
days to watch the replay. They get the replays up pretty quick, but you only at the hub, but you only get a few days to watch those replays, and then they're part of the the training program that hosts the conference, and not available anymore to regular viewing. So there's a lot
Yeah,
of different options. I mean, you could have them open to because we're having these registrants, people are registering. You can actually do it through Zoom. Not that I'm suggesting we should. I don't want as a Zoom maven, but you could have it send them the link to the YouTube video and make that available for 2 months to whoever registered, or forever to whoever registered. So you can do it on YouTube as a private group and then only let our mavens get access to that, or you can do it through Zoom that anybody who registered could watch the video for either a given
yeah,
period of time or in perpetuity. Or there's lots of different options. You just have to decide what are we why are we offering this, and to whom are we offering it, and is it our community service to be able to offer it for everybody forever, or are we using so much energy from our volunteers within our own group that maybe we want to make sure that we're not overtaxing them by making everything available for free for everybody or whatever. So
yeah,
it's a discussion that can always change as the
Yeah.
board
And
changes.
it goes with, are we having it on Saturdays at 11 because that's history, or we have to pick a day when a lot of our authors can't be there. I'll go back and compare. I mean, I knew some of the members. I don't know all the new members. And I know some came to the business meeting, but I'll compare the registration list, with the attendance
Yeah.
and see, and then with the membership list to see who's coming. But,
yeah.
authors are busy on weekends. So it's all part of
Saturdays
that
are a
discussion.
hard day.
Yeah.
Saturdays
Uh,
are a really hard day. I mean, I reminded Joe again, and he went, "Oh, yeah, there goes another hiking day." And of course, it's gorgeous out right now.
Or
Um, but Saturdays are hard. And I honestly, when I got on and there was nobody in the business meeting, I knew Nina was going to join, but I was sitting there thinking, okay, so me and Nina, we can chat for half an hour. And then all of a sudden I
I
started
mean,
getting messages, help, I can't get in.
aside
Um,
from the update that screwed up the needing the password code, we had a couple members who, don't
yeah,
usually come to the program, like Nancy
yeah,
and Lori.
yeah.
They
Nancy
didn't
started
stay or
coming,
come,
Lori
or
came, yeah, and
but a few
Libby, I
people
think.
did come to both meetings. So
yeah.
Yeah, I was actually pleasantly
yeah.
surprised because really with the numbers, no, I'm joking. I knew, Jen, I knew you were going to be there. I knew Jacqueline was going to be there, but Ellen, I thought there was a chance you might not be there.
Mm-mm.
And Amy wasn't going to be there, and Eleanor wasn't going to be there, and Carol and Tina and Rodney, and it was just I was going, and Chris emailed me, she's teaching, and she was sorry she wasn't going to make it. So I was, getting these can't make it, can't make it, can't come, can't make it, so sorry. And I was thinking, okay, it's going to be a light meeting.
I wonder,
All the better for minutes, Nina.
I'm so glad we got 28, or, I know it counts the
I
five of
know.
us, or, but
And
Debbie,
Mally
instead of
came.
when we had 50 something or 40 something, but
Yeah. And Mally's in
just
London and she came. I That was cool. I wasn't expecting to see Mally, but she was great. I was, yeah, I took a couple of screenshots, sorry, but yeah, I was,
Oh no,
it's like, did I
I
do
did
that?
too.
I
I think
think
I did that.
also
I have to
she
go back
allowed,
and look.
she probably has a few different slides, but some of these are on her YouTube video. I mean, that's her talk, but
That's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can also get a lot of that from her YouTube. I
Yeah,
find it interesting. So I'm not a structuralist. Right. I couldn't want to write after I sorted out all the major scenes, but I like the way she, when she was talking about
yeah,
architecture. So she uses,
yeah,
so I could see using a few lampposts and maybe writing those foundational scenes out of order. Although frankly, I discover my characters as I write. So it just means I'm going to cut my first couple of
me
chapters.
too.
But yeah.
I mean, as I
I'm more
said,
of a
been thinking
pantser.
Nina had read my commenter because
Yeah.
I've looked at all the different beats, save the cat, romancing the
Yeah,
beat, and it's like, and maybe because I'm not a big structuralist either. So that was very interesting whether I'll use that. I found oh, okay, Haley Efron talked about just like the 4 act, or she had
Mhm.
3 act, but I like 4 act.
I like
And
four
so
act.
if you get a couple of those
Yeah.
things, then you write to them, and it doesn't matter if you go off of it. But that I found more helpful than the structure, like the
Yeah. I can't remember where I got.
outlining, save the cat. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
like
I'm
the,
not sure I'm going to go back and use it, but it's really interesting to see what she did with it, does with it.
yeah. Did
helps
anybody
to
go
write a blurb too.
what did
Mally's Mally wrote a great blog post. I don't know if you've all seen it.
No.
And talking about how to uh, write the back of your book, the blur your black back blurb first. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you guys. I
Great. No,
copied
that's
the
good.
link.
Yeah.
It was very good.
I essentially
Uh,
think of a log
yeah.
line before I actually start
Yeah.
writing anything. So I have a
Yeah,
point.
the log line. I have my students do a contributors note. I have them do something else that where they think about how they were inspired and what they wanted to do, and people find that helpful. But
Did you guys
yeah.
attend the pantsing one? Ed Hill did it on national a talk this last a webinar. It was so funny
No,
because
I signed
if
up.
you're
I
a
signed
pantser,
up.
he's obviously not a pantser. So he said, "Oh, my last book, I've written, so many books, and this one I did this way, and this one I did, and the last one I pantsed." But he totally didn't pants because he's like, "There's this and this and this and this. These have to happen. These," and I think he said them as 7 points have to happen in a story. And so then I figured out how those would work, and I broke it up into how many words would have to happen for each section. So like he structured it so much that he had to do his word count to fit each. He's like, that way I only have to write 50 page. I only have to know 50 pages because he likes to do short stories. So but he set it all up ahead of time and chunked it out into 50-page increments. And so like someone of course the chat's going wild, and someone in the chat was just like, yeah, this is not what I would consider pantsing. Because he was so regimented about, from this word to this word covers this stuff in the structure, and he figures out his characters ahead of time and the point ahead. It was just funny. I'm like, yeah, okay, he's not a natural pantser. That's just too much work. I couldn't possibly. You spend more time
That's
figuring out all
funny.
the word counts and the posts that milestones you're supposed to hit. That I could have actually drafted up my first couple of chapters by then. Oh well. All right, ladies. I'm
No,
gonna
I didn't do that.
get up.
Jenna, before we go, and I will ask Amy to cut out the last 20 minutes of discussion.
Oh yeah, you're
You're a
still.
dog trainer,
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I
barking.
stopped recording.
Do you have any really good tips for stopping barking?
You have to know the circumstances in which they bark.
I think he's reactive more than anything else.
And does he
He'll
do it
hear
more than,
something and and I know that's an unfair question. It's like,
does he
so
do it,
solve the meaning of life.
yeah, does he do it when you're
Um,
home as much as he does it when you're not at home? Like, do you know if he's always doing
he
it?
does it more when I'm home,
Mhm.
than when Joe's home alone with him.
Mhm.
And he will do it. So for instance, what got him today was a Nara banged on the door downstairs, and he heard, and immediately he was sleeping behind me, and I felt his whole body tense, and he jumped and he started barking. or something catches his eye out the window and he'll bark, but he doesn't do it as much. Last night he just walked up behind Joe and barked. Um, the cat jumped up and he was feeding him, and Duncan just walked up and sent Joe through the ceiling. So
Joe was feeding Inara.
yeah, and
Yeah,
and
so it's
and
sibling stuff. So Einar
simply
barked the
Yeah,
door, so he's
although if
barking.
he's more reactive,
Joe's feeding Einar.
if he's more reactive or responsive when you're home than when you're not at home, like if he's not barking much at noises or the cat when you're not there, or does it more when you're there than when just Joe's there, or your neighbor complains about it or something, that then he feels like he has to be in charge to make sure you're safe. Like he's responding to feeling the need to protect you, making himself more reactive, as opposed to if he's, not bark when no one's home. If he doesn't bark, then it's because he thinks that he's responsible for taking care of you and Joe. And that you can fix. If he's barking all the time, then yeah, I usually
no.
put some soft music on.
And the
And you
neighbors aren't
can't hear when
complaining.
the
They all
cat's
think he's
knocking on the
adorable, but
outside door or what.
yeah.
But yeah, if he's more reactive under certain circumstances, then it's because he feels he has to he's in charge of your safety, and so he's going to be hyper vigilant. Um, and that's easier to fix actually than someone who's just perpetually
Dude,
paranoid.
I'm safe.
Yeah, got to
He's
communicate.
sitting there listening to you. It's really funny. He looked up and he's like, "What?" Yes, that's listen to that woman. That's what I'm doing.
Mom,
Sorry.
take care of
Sorry,
herself.
guys.
All right.
Thank you again,
Thank you.
Nina.
Ellen, are you feeling better?
A little better, but I still wouldn't have been able to do what Nina did. She did just a great job. Thank you, as
Go and
always. But
rest.
yeah,
Yeah, Nina,
so
you were wonderful. Thank you so much. Jenna,
oh, as
thank
always,
you for
and Jenna
for
too
your
with the
tech
tech.
support.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, feel free to
so
reply if I write stuff wrong in the chat as a response. I'm just trying to guess. Just trying to be
I
No,
didn't
responsive.
want
and
to get yeah.
actually, I'm not really sure right now what we're doing. We will probably make this one available again earlier because so many people can do it. And whether we make it available to, I think saying we made it available to the Mavens is very appropriate because then everybody will go, never mind, we'll just look at the Maven site. So I think that was appropriate. Maybe she'll join. I don't even know if she's a member. I'm sorry, the name didn't ring a bell
Yeah.
when
Well,
she wrote.
nowadays, there's probably a bunch you don't know the names of.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Um,
Cool.
thanks, guys. Duncan says thank
Thank
you, Jenna.
you. Bye,
Hi,
Duncan.
Duncan. Love to
Such a
work with you,
cutie.
buddy.
Oh, take care.
Take
Bye.
care,
Have a
guys.
great
Bye.
weekend.
You
Bye.
too. Bye bye.